Have you ever felt like you're living inside an invisible box? Every day feels the same, a comfortable routine. But there's this nagging emptiness, a quiet voice that whispers, "This is it. You can't change." If that sounds familiar, then you already know Aaron. There was once a man named Aaron who lived this life every single day. He had what most people would call a good life. A steady job, a decent home, a predictable future. But beneath the surface, there was an unshakable void. Every morning he'd look in the mirror, see a stranger staring back and whisper, "Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow I'll feel different." But tomorrow always mirrored yesterday. His life was a silent movie playing on a loop, the same commute, the same desk, the same lonely dinner in a room that echoed with everything he wasn't. One particular night, after another silent meal where the only sound was the ticking of the clock, something shifted. The quiet wasn't just quiet anymore, it was deafening. It was the sound of a life unlived. Restless, Aaron started rummaging through an old dusty chest in his attic, a relic from a past he'd almost forgotten. Inside he found a worn-out notebook from his younger days. He blew the dust off the cover and opened it to a random page. His own handwriting, bold and full of a fire he no longer recognized, stared back at him. Two simple phrases were written there. "Become fearless. Become free." Those words didn't just land. They struck him like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just ink on a page, it was a ghost from his past, a forgotten promise he'd made to himself. In that moment, staring at the dreams of a younger, braver version of himself, the old Aaron, the one who lived in the box, the one who waited for tomorrow, began to fade away. That night marked the end of his life of quiet desperation. Not because some magical event happened, not because someone came to save him, but because he finally, irrevocably, decided to stop waiting for permission to live. He decided to save himself. This is where the real journey begins. Aaron's transformation wasn't about grand gestures or overnight success. It was subtle, internal, and profound. He decided to become a scientist of his own mind. His thoughts, which had been his jailers for so long, now became his subjects of study. He started questioning everything. That inner voice that said, "You're not good enough?" He'd ask, "Says who? Where is the evidence?" The fear that whispered, "Don't try, you'll only fail." He'd counter it with, "And what if I don't? What if failure is just a lesson?" He began to see the architecture of his own prison. He realized his life wasn't trapped by fate or bad luck or the circumstances he found himself in. No, it was trapped by a complex web of beliefs he had accepted as truth. Every past rejection, every failure, every excuse he'd ever made, was simply a reflection of his mind's deep-seated fear of growth, of stepping into the unknown. His comfort zone wasn't a safe haven. It was a cage he had built for himself, bar by bar, with every "I can't" he ever uttered. With this newfound awareness, Aaron began the slow, deliberate practice of change. He knew he couldn't tear down the entire prison in one day, so he started by loosening one brick at a time. He started with small, almost insignificant acts of courage. Instead of hitting the snooze button, he'd wake up an hour earlier to sit in silence, just observing his thoughts without judgment. Instead of automatically saying yes to things that drained his energy, he learned the difficult but liberating power of saying no. Each day he set a simple challenge: face one fear. It didn't have to be a big one. One day it was making small talk with the barista. The next it was speaking up in a meeting at work, even if his voice trembled. Another day, it was finally starting the first page of a book he'd always wanted to write. These weren't heroic feats, but to Aaron they were monumental. Each small act of defiance against his old self was a victory. At first it was agonizing. Every step outside his comfort zone felt like walking on broken glass. His mind screamed at him, begging him to return to the familiar safety of the box. Doubt was his constant companion. There were days he felt like a fraud, days he was convinced he'd made a huge mistake. The pain of growth was real, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, something incredible started to happen. The pain began to transform. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was the ache of a muscle being used for the first time. It was the discomfort of shedding an old skin. The pain became power. The man who once ran from his own reflection, who couldn't bear to look himself in the eye, now found himself standing in front of the mirror. But this time, he wasn't looking for a stranger. He was looking for a friend. And he would smile. Not a perfect, polished, everything is great kind of smile. It was a real, authentic smile, one that acknowledged the scars, the struggle, and the strength it took to be standing there. He wasn't smiling because he had become perfect. He was smiling because, for the first time in his life, he was becoming real. Through this process, Aaron discovered the most profound truth about personal change. He learned that transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's not about adding layers or crafting a new personality. It's the exact opposite. It's about shedding who you are not. It's about unlearning the limiting beliefs, peeling back the layers of fear, and dismantling the false identity you built to protect yourself. It's about returning to the authentic self that was there all along, buried under years of conditioning and doubt, the self that wrote, "Become fearless, become free," in that old notebook. In the end, Aaron didn't change because his job demanded it, or because society expected it, or because he wanted to impress anyone. He transformed for one reason, and one reason only. Because his soul, his true essence, refused to stay asleep any longer. It was a quiet rebellion that roared into a revolution from within. And that, right there, is the core psychology of self-transformation. It's not about waiting for the world to change for you. It's about that powerful, pivotal moment when you finally realize that your own mind can be your most impenetrable prison, or it can be your most liberating path to freedom. The choice, as Aaron discovered, has always been yours. So look at your own life. What invisible box are you living in? What tomorrows have you been waiting for? Maybe tonight is the night you find your own old notebook, metaphorically speaking. Maybe it's time to listen to that part of you that refuses to stay asleep. Because your freedom isn't out there somewhere. It's right here, waiting for you to claim it. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content that explores the power of the human mind. Take care, and remember to be kind to yourself on your path.